The livestock yard outside Crestwood sat like a wound on the edge of town, all rust and broken fences and the particular smell of desperation that clung to places where living things were sold by the pound. June Morrison pulled her truck into the gravel lot on a Tuesday morning when the sky hung low and gray, promising rain that wouldn't come. She had $40 in her wallet and a ranch that was bleeding money faster than she could earn it. The mare stood in the back pen, separated from the other animals like something contagious. She was a bay, or had been once, before starvation had carved her ribs into ladder rungs beneath skin stretched too tight. Her coat was dull, patchy in places where wounds had healed wrong or not healed at all. But it was her eyes that stopped June cold, dark and intelligent and holding a wildness that wasn't mean, just terrified. "That one's $20, the yard manager said, appearing at June's elbow like bad news. He was a thin man with yellowed teeth and the smile of someone who enjoyed other people's suffering. "She came in 3 days ago. No papers, no owner. She's headed for the meat truck tomorrow if nobody takes her. $20. The price of a cheap meal, the cost of a life nobody wanted." June thought about the empty stalls at her ranch, about the feed bills she couldn't pay, and the mortgage notice that had arrived last week. Thought about the sensible thing to do, which was walk away and let someone else make bad decisions. But the mare was watching her with eyes that held something June recognized, the particular desperation of creatures who'd been abandoned by a world that had promised to care for them. "I'll take her," June heard herself say. Loading the mare took an hour of patience and soft words, and the kind of careful approach you used with things that were broken but not yet beyond repair. The horse trembled when June touched her, flinched from the halter, balked at the trailer. But eventually, exhaustion won over fear, and the mare stepped inside, her hooves ringing hollow against metal that had carried too many animals to places they didn't want to go. June drove home slowly, aware of the precious cargo behind her, the life she'd just committed to saving when she could barely save herself. The ranch appeared through the trees, 60 acres of Montana hill country that had belonged to her family for 3 generations and would probably be lost on her watch. The barn needed a new roof. The fences sagged. The house had stopped feeling like home after her husband died 2 years ago and started feeling like a museum of everything she'd failed to preserve. But the barn was still standing, and the stalls were still clean, and June led the mare inside with hands that had forgotten how to be gentle with anything except animals who needed gentleness to survive. She named her Grace because that's what the mare would need. Grace to heal. Grace to trust again. Grace to become something other than the starving creature the world had decided wasn't worth $20. The wounds came to light as June examined her in the barn's dim interior. Old scars on her legs, fresh abrasions on her shoulders, and a strange mark on her left hip that looked almost like a brand but wasn't any design June recognized. It was geometric, precise, like something meant to convey information rather than ownership. The pattern nagged at her, familiar in a way she couldn't place, but it was while cleaning a deep gash on Grace's neck that June found it. Her fingers brushed something hard beneath the skin, something that didn't belong. She parted the mare's mane carefully and saw the small scar, maybe 6 months old, where something had been inserted. A microchip. Most horses had them for identification, registered through national databases that helped reunite lost animals with owners. June had a scanner in her tack room, a cheap one she'd bought years ago when she still planned to breed horses and needed to track lineage. She retrieved it now, her hand shaking slightly as she powered it on and held it against Grace's neck. The screen flickered. Numbers appeared, But they weren't the standard 15-digit identification code June expected. Instead, the scanner displayed a string of characters that looked like coordinates, latitude and longitude mixed with timestamps and abbreviations that made no sense. 47.2389N, 114.5678W, 03.4722, U7LT. June stared at the screen, her mind trying to make patterns from chaos. Coordinates pointed to locations. Timestamps indicated when. But U7LT, that looked like military notation or maybe emergency services. Unit 7. Last something. She needed a better scanner. Needed someone who understood what she was looking at. Dr. Raymond Webb had been the large animal veterinarian in Crestwood for 40 years, long enough that he'd treated every horse June's family had ever owned. He came to the ranch that evening, his truck rattling up the drive just as the sun began its descent behind the mountains. He examined Grace with the careful attention of someone who'd seen too much suffering to be shocked by it anymore. Severely malnourished, he said, running practiced hands along Grace's ribs. Dehydrated. These wounds are weeks old, some of them infected. She's been running hard and eating nothing. Where'd you find her? County livestock yard, $20. Webb's expression darkened. They should have called animal services. This is abuse, not just neglect. Can you scan the microchip? June asked. There's something strange about it. Webb pulled out his professional-grade scanner, a device that could read chips from multiple manufacturers and access the national databases. He held it against Grace's neck, and his eyebrows rose as the screen filled with data that scrolled too fast to read. This isn't a standard pet identification chip, he said slowly. This is encrypted, multiple data layers. I'm seeing GPS, coordinates, but there's dozens of them, maybe hundreds. And this designation, U7LT, that's search and rescue notation, Unit 7 last transmission. June's skin prickled cold despite the warm barn air. Search and rescue? For what? Webb was quiet for a long moment, his fingers working the scanner's controls, trying to decrypt layers of information that resisted casual access. Finally, he looked up, his weathered face troubled. June, do you remember about 5 years ago, that volunteer search and rescue team that disappeared? They were looking for those missing children. There were dozens of them, taken over a period of years. The team went into the wilderness following a lead and never came back. 7 people just vanished. June's memory stirred. She'd been dealing with her husband's illness then, hadn't paid much attention to news outside her own crisis. But yes, she remembered fragments. A massive search effort that found nothing. Grieving families with no closure. Theories ranging from accident to foul play. The team leader was a woman named Catherine Walsh, Webb continued, expert tracker. She always rode a bay mare. He looked at Grace with new recognition. A bay mare with a geometric brand on her left hip. The barn suddenly felt colder. June looked at Grace, who stood calmly eating hay, unaware that she carried secrets embedded in her flesh. The coordinates, June said. Can you read the first one? Webb scrolled through the encrypted data. 47.2389 north, 114.5678 west. That's maybe 30 miles northeast of here, up in the high country. What's there? Nothing that I know of, just wilderness, old logging roads nobody uses anymore. Webb met June's eyes. June, whatever this is, it's dangerous. If this mare really did belong to that search and rescue team, and if she's carrying information about what happened to them, there are people who made sure that team never came back. People who wouldn't want you asking questions. But June was already planning the trip in her mind, already pulling maps from memory, already feeling the pull of mystery the way Grace had felt the pull of running until her body gave out. Someone had put that chip in this horse's neck. Someone had encoded dozens of coordinates into encrypted data. Someone had meant for this information to be found, and June intended to find it. The first coordinate led June to a place that appeared on no map she owned. An abandoned trail station deep in the Bitterroot Mountains, accessible only by an old logging road that had surrendered to forest years ago. She went alone, driving her truck as far as the overgrown path would allow, then hiking the final 2 miles with a backpack containing water, a GPS unit, and the naive belief that she was just satisfying curiosity. The trail station materialized through the trees like a ghost gaining substance, a small wooden structure that had once provided shelter for rangers or loggers, now sagging into the earth that was slowly reclaiming it. The door hung open, hinges rusted, and inside June found evidence of recent habitation. Not recent as in days or weeks, but years. 5 years, perhaps. Coffee cans arranged in careful rows. A sleeping bag shredded by animals but still bearing the logo of the search and rescue organization. Maps tacked to the walls, marked with red ink in patterns June couldn't decipher. And in the corner, half buried under debris and bird droppings, a radio transmitter with a broken antenna and a label that made June's breath catch. Unit 7. Last transmission, IO 3:47:22. The timestamp from Grace's microchip, 3:47 and 22 seconds. This was where the team had been when they sent their final message. But sent it to whom? And why had no one come? June photographed everything, her hands shaking as she documented the maps, the supplies, the radio. She was about to leave when she noticed scratches on the wooden floor near the door. Deliberate marks, too uniform to be random damage. She knelt and brushed away years of accumulated dirt and debris. Numbers, carved deep into the wood with something sharp. Another set of coordinates different from the first. And beneath them, words etched with desperate precision. They know. Move fast. C.W. Catherine Walsh, the team leader. She'd left this message knowing someone would eventually follow the trail. The second coordinate took June deeper into the wilderness, to a campsite hidden in a canyon where a small stream provided water and thick pine coverage provided concealment. Here she found more evidence of the team's passage. Fire pits carefully dismantled and scattered, tent stakes driven into the ground in patterns that formed arrows pointing north, and buried beneath rocks near the stream, a waterproof container holding a notebook. The entries were brief, written in different handwriting as different team members contributed observations. June read them sitting on a fallen log, while afternoon shadows lengthened and the forest around her filled with sounds that felt less like nature and more like watching. Day 3. Found the first sign. Broken toy near the old mining access road. Matches description from the Hendricks case. We're on the right track. CW Day 7. Found 3 more markers. Someone's moving them deliberately, trying to throw us off, but we're getting closer. The children were brought through here. I can feel it. Derek Day, 11. Split up to cover more ground. Bad idea, but necessary. Time's running out. If we don't find proof soon, the authorities will shut us down. CW Day 14. Found them. Or found where they were taken. Coordinates below. Can't transmit yet. Someone's jamming our signal. We'll move to higher ground tomorrow. If anyone finds this, trust no one in town. CW. The coordinates below were circled 3 times, underlined, marked with exclamation points that conveyed urgency across. 5 years of silence. June's hands trembled as she copied them into her phone. Found them. The missing children. Catherine Walsh and her team had actually found evidence of what happened to 47 children who'd vanished over a span of years. And then the team had vanished too. She returned to her truck as dusk settled over the mountains, her mind racing. The notebook made clear that someone had been actively working against the rescue team, jamming their communications, possibly tracking their movements, and that someone had connections in town. Connections powerful enough that a volunteer search team's disappearance could be explained away as tragic accident without serious investigation. Back at the ranch, June spread the maps and notes across her kitchen table and tried to make sense of the pattern. The coordinates formed a trail through the wilderness, each point building toward something, leading somewhere. But where? And why had the team never made it there? Dr. Webb stopped by the next morning, ostensibly to check on Grace, but really to express concern about the obsession he saw developing in June's eyes. "You're planning to follow the rest of the coordinates," he said. Statement, not question. Someone has to. Catherine Walsh died trying to find those children. Her whole team died. I can't just ignore what they were trying to tell us. June, they didn't die trying. They died succeeding. That's the difference, and it's what should scare you. Webb sat heavily in one of her kitchen chairs. If they found evidence of what happened to those children, evidence significant enough to get them killed, what makes you think you'll survive finding the same evidence? I'll be careful. Catherine Walsh was careful. She was trained, experienced, had a whole team supporting her, and she still ended up dead. June looked out the window at Grace, grazing peacefully in the pasture. The mare had gained weight in the week since June brought her home. Her coat beginning to shine, her eyes less haunted. She'd been running when June found her, carrying the last desperate message of people who'd died trying to save children nobody else could find. "I have to try," June said quietly. "For those families who never got answers. For Catherine and her team. For Grace, who ran until she collapsed trying to make sure their work mattered." Webb was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled a gun from his jacket pocket and set it on the table between them. "Take this, and take someone with you. Don't go alone into those mountains." But June knew she would go alone, because whoever had killed the rescue team was still out there, still protecting whatever secret they'd discovered, and the more people June involved, the more people would be in danger. The third coordinate led to another campsite, and the fourth to a cave system where the team had clearly taken shelter during a storm. At each location, June found small signs they'd left behind, cairns of stones, marking trails, scratches on trees forming arrows, buried caches containing supplies, and more notes. The notes grew increasingly urgent as the team got closer to their goal. Day 19. "We're being followed. Not sure how long they've been tracking us, but they're good. Moving only at night now." Derek Day, 21. Found the access road. It's hidden but maintained. Someone's been using it regularly. Fresh tire tracks less than a week old. This isn't abandoned. This is active. CW Day, 23. We can see the compound from the ridge. 3 buildings, fenced perimeter, vehicles. This is it. This is where they brought the children. We need to get closer, get photos, then get out and contact the FBI. Can't trust local authorities. CW Day 24. They found us. Don't know how, but they knew we were here. Team is scattered. Derek's hurt. Need to regroup, but they're hunting us. Sending Grace away with the coordinates. If anyone finds her, finish this. The children deserve justice. We're going to try to make it out, but if we don't... CW. The entry ended mid-sentence, the pen scoring a line across the page as if Catherine's hand had been pulled away suddenly. June sat in that cave for a long time, reading that final entry over and over, feeling the presence of the woman who'd written it. Catherine had known she was going to die, had known the team was being hunted, but even then, even with death closing in, she'd thought about the mission first. She'd sent Grace away carrying the evidence, hoping the mare would survive long enough for someone to find her and decode the message she carried. Grace had survived. Barely. She'd run for days, maybe weeks, until starvation and exhaustion had brought her to that livestock yard where June had found her. Now, June had to decide. Turn this evidence over to authorities and hope they'd investigate, or follow the final coordinates herself and see what Catherine had seen. The compound where the children had been taken. The place the team had died trying to expose. The decision wasn't really a decision at all. June had come too far to stop now. The fifth coordinate was the last one, and it pointed to a location 30 miles northwest of the cave, deep in national forest land that bordered private property belonging to a corporation June had never heard of. Clearwater Land Management, LLC. She researched them that night, finding virtually nothing except incorporation papers and property tax records. They owned significant acreage throughout the region, always in remote areas, always under slightly different subsidiary names. The holdings formed a pattern on the map, isolated parcels connected by old logging roads and Forest Service trails, creating a network that looked, to June's increasingly suspicious eyes, like infrastructure designed to move things without being noticed. Things, or people. She made the final trip on a Saturday morning, telling no one where she was going, leaving a note on her kitchen table with all the coordinates and evidence in case she didn't return. Webb's gun sat heavy in her jacket pocket, and she tried not to think about whether she'd actually be able to use it if confronted. The final location was a valley hidden by ridge lines that made it invisible from any road or trail. June parked 2 miles away and hiked in, moving carefully, watching for any sign of surveillance or activity. The valley appeared empty, just trees and rocks and a stream cutting through the center. But appearances, June had learned, were often lies. She found the compound exactly where Catherine's notes said it would be, concealed beneath camouflage netting and built into the hillside so it was nearly invisible from above. 3 buildings, chain-link fence and tire tracks leading to a dirt road that disappeared into the forest. And on the far side of the compound, partially collapsed but still visible, was a 4th structure. A bunker, built into the hillside with a metal door hanging open like a mouth. June approached carefully, every instinct screaming at her to run. But Catherine had come this far. Catherine had died for what was inside that bunker. The least June could do was bear witness. The bunker's interior was dark and cold, the air stale with years of being sealed. June pulled out her flashlight and stepped inside, her shadow stretching long and distorted against concrete walls that had been built to last and to hide. The main chamber was empty except for metal bed frames, dozens of them arranged in rows, with restraints still attached. A hold-in facility. A prison for children who'd been taken and kept and used for purposes June's mind refused to fully contemplate. But it was the side chamber that held the evidence that mattered. Filing cabinets, water-damaged but intact. Records, names, dates. Transportation logs showing children moved between facilities across multiple states. Financial records linking the operation to people whose names June recognized. People with power and money and the ability to make problems disappear. And in the corner, beneath a collapsed section of ceiling, June found them. The bodies, the rescue team. All 7 of them, including Catherine Walsh, buried beneath rubble that looked less like accident and more like intentional collapse. They'd made it this far, had found the evidence, but before they could escape with it, someone had sealed them inside their discovery, ensuring both the evidence and the witnesses would be lost forever. Except they'd sent Grace away first, had given the Mare a fighting chance to deliver their final message. And June had found it. June photographed everything, her hands steady despite the horror surrounding her. The records, the holding cells, the bodies, the evidence that 47 children had been brought through this facility over a span of years, processed like cargo, documented like inventory. She photographed the names in the filing cabinets, the corporate documents linking Clearwater Land Management to a network of similar facilities, the financial trails that led to people whose faces appeared regularly on news broadcasts talking about law and order and protecting children. The hypocrisy tasted like bile. She was about to leave when she noticed something carved into the concrete wall near Catherine's body. A final message, scratched with something sharp, written by someone who knew they were going to die. GPS in Mare. Send to FBI Field Office Billings. Trust no local. 4 to 7 kids deserve truth. C.W. Billings. Not the local sheriff's office, not the state police, but the FBI field office 200 miles away. Catherine had known the corruption ran local, had understood that some people in power were complicit in what happened here. June climbed out of the bunker into afternoon sunlight that felt obscene after the darkness below. She had everything she needed: evidence, coordinates, documentation. She also had a decision to make about how to use it. She could go directly to the FBI, hand over everything, let them handle it through official channels. Or she could make sure the evidence went public first, making it impossible to bury or discredit. Catherine's message said to trust the FBI, but 5 years had passed. 5 years of silence and no investigation. 5 years of those 7 bodies lying in an abandoned bunker while life went on above ground. June drove straight through to Billings, stopping only for gas. The evidence stored on 3 separate SD cards hidden in different locations in case someone tried to stop her. She didn't go to the FBI field office. Instead, she went to the offices of the state's largest newspaper and asked to speak to their investigative journalism team. The reporter who met with her was a woman named Kelly Atkins, 35 and sharp-eyed, with the particular skepticism of someone who'd heard too many conspiracy theories that led nowhere. She listened to June's story without interrupting, her expression carefully neutral. "You're telling me you found evidence of a child trafficking operation that's been running for at least a decade, that you found the bodies of a missing search and rescue team, and that this is all connected to a microchip in a horse you bought for $20. Yes. And you expect me to believe this?" June pulled out the SD cards and set them on the table. "I expect you to verify it. Look at the evidence. Cross-reference the names in those files with missing children cases. Check the corporate records for Clearwater Land Management. Talk to the families of the rescue team members, and then decide if I'm crazy or if I'm the first person in 5 years to actually care enough to finish what Catherine Walsh started." Kelly Atkins looked at the SD cards for a long moment. Then she picked them up and called her editor. The story broke 3 days later, front page above the fold, with photographs and documentation and enough verifiable evidence that it couldn't be, dismissed as conspiracy or fantasy. The FBI launched an immediate investigation. State police secured the compound. The bodies of the rescue team were recovered and given proper burial. And the names in those files, the children who'd been taken. Those names went to families who'd spent years not knowing if their missing sons and daughters were alive or dead or suffering somewhere beyond reach. The evidence couldn't bring the children back. Most of them were dead. The records made that clear. But it gave their families something: truth, closure. The knowledge that someone had cared enough to fight for justice even when the odds were impossible. June testified before grand juries, gave interviews to journalists, endured death threats from people who claimed she was destroying innocent lives with false accusations. But the evidence spoke louder than threats, and one by one the network of people involved in the trafficking operation was exposed and arrested. The corruption ran deep, deeper than June had imagined. Local officials, state representatives, businessmen whose charitable foundations claimed to help at-risk children, while actually supplying the very system that victimized them. The investigation expanded across state lines, uncovering facilities in 6 states, rescuing 14 children who were still alive, identifying remains of dozens who weren't. Through it all, June kept working her ranch, kept caring for Grace, kept living the quiet life she'd always known even as the world around her erupted in scandal and revelation. The mare thrived under proper care, her coat gleaming, her body filling out, her eyes losing the haunted quality that had defined her when June first saw her in that livestock yard. Grace didn't know she'd become a symbol, didn't understand that she represented the determination of 7 people who'd refused to give up on 47 children, who died trying to make sure the truth survived even if they didn't. She was just a horse, content to graze and sleep and occasionally nuzzle June's shoulder looking for treats. But to June, Grace was everything. A reminder that sometimes the smallest choices, $20 spent on a starving mare, could change the course of history. That sometimes the broken things nobody wanted carried the answers everyone needed. 6 months after the story broke, June attended a memorial service for Catherine Walsh and her team. The families of the 7 volunteers gathered in a cemetery outside Crestwood, finally able to bury their loved ones with full knowledge of what they died for. June stood at the back, uncomfortable with the gratitude people kept expressing, insisting she'd just followed the trail Catherine had left. But Catherine's sister found her after the service, pressed a photograph into her hands. Catherine as a young woman standing beside a bay mare with a geometric brand on her hip, both of them looking strong and capable and alive. She would have wanted you to have this, the sister said. She would have wanted you to know that Grace made it, that their last transmission was received, that it mattered. June looked at the photograph, at Catherine's smile, at Grace in her prime. It mattered, she said quietly. They all mattered. That evening, June sat on her porch watching Grace graze in the pasture while the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The ranch would survive now. Reward money from the investigation had cleared her debts and then some. But June would have done it anyway, would have followed those coordinates and uncovered that evidence if it had cost her everything, because some things mattered more than money or safety or comfort. Justice mattered. Truth mattered. Children mattered. And sometimes a starving horse bought for $20 carried the key to all of it, encoded in a microchip beneath skin and mane and the terrible scars of running until exhaustion brought you to the only person who would care enough to listen to what you were trying to say. Grace raised her head and looked toward the porch, her dark eyes meeting June's across the distance. The sun caught her coat and made her glow like something holy, like something preserved against impossible odds to deliver a message that refused to stay buried. June raised her hand in acknowledgement, in gratitude. in the quiet understanding that passed between creatures who'd both survived things that should have broken them. The mare returned to grazing. The sun continued its descent. And in the growing darkness, June felt the presence of Catherine Walsh and her team. 7 people who'd died knowing their work would outlast them, that their last transmission would eventually be received, that someone would care enough to finish what they'd started. She'd finished it. The children had their justice. The families had their truth. And Grace had delivered the message she'd been sent to deliver, running until her body gave out, surviving until someone noticed, carrying hope embedded in her flesh across years of silence and suffering. $20. That's what June had paid for a starving mare. But what she'd received was priceless. The chance to give voice to the voiceless, to honor the dead by serving the living, to prove that sometimes the smallest acts of compassion rippled outward into consequences beyond measure. The stars emerged one by one, puncturing the darkness, and June sat watching them appear while Grace grazed peacefully below, and the world continued its endless turning, a little more just than it had been, before a woman bought a horse nobody wanted, and discovered that unwanted things often carried the answers everyone needed.